Trying to make more sense of your family business? Let's talk about it.
Welcome to another episode of Making Sense of Family Business. Today I'm going to be talking about what's fair. Equal ain't the same as equitable. I'm John Kenfield, the Family Business Solutionist, broadcasting from Melbourne in Australia. This is probably going to be a fairly short video compared to most of the other causes of conflict we get into, but it's a really major issue. When I began having conversations with matriarchs and patriarchs leading family businesses many years ago, I thought I was talking about something that had occurred to me that didn't occur to other people when I talked about what's fair and the difference between equity and equality. Frankly, nobody I talked to about it seemed to have really come across it before, but I now know that it's taught to primary school children, and a good thing that it is too. Hopefully it'll flow through eventually. What's the core problem? Why does this issue create so many problems in a family business? It's quite simple. Parents say, I love my children equally, and therefore I am going to treat them equally. And what they will then do is, if they've got, say, 3 kids, one of whom spent the last 30 years working in the business, and the other 2 have been pursuing other careers, building homes, building families, and all the rest of it. Whilst over the years there have been promises to the one working in the business, one day this will all be yours, and they've often been underpaid, so they paid their sweat equity to buy their share in the business. When it comes to it and parents start looking at their estate planning, they say, I can't do this to my other children. I've got to spread all of my assets equally, and therefore I'm going to give you a third, and your 2 sisters are going to get a third each, even though they've had nothing to do with the business and actually have no real interest in the business. Now, the most extreme example I've come across was a family where there were 3 kids. Dad had built a very successful business. His oldest daughter was a merchant banker, married literally to a brain surgeon. They had 3 gifted kids. They were making great money. They had absolutely no financial needs. They couldn't meet themselves. The middle child was the brother, the only boy, and he had been working with Dad in the business since he was 16 years old. He was a good hard worker, decent guy, had never self-educated into business, and he was basically working as a tradie supervisor, doing installations and the like, running a small team, working hard, contributing well, but not really looking like a leader of the business. And Dad, unfortunately, hadn't done anything terribly much to mentor him or train him to become a leader of the business. But he was a good, solid person, and it was very clear, although there was some embarrassment with it, that Dad had frequently promised him, and the rest of the family knew this, that one day he'd take over the business and the 2 girls would be looked after in other ways. The 3rd child, the youngest daughter, was much younger. She was, I think, 12 years younger than the son. And she was in her late 20s. She had 2 children from 2 different fathers, neither of whom were on the scene. They were both badly affected by fetal alcohol syndrome because unfortunately she got in with the wrong crowd as a teenager and been heavily into drugs and alcohol ever since. Her children were affected by it. She was not really an effective worker. She had no particular skills or talents. She was given a junior clerical job in the business more as an act of charity, because if any normal person had performed at as poor a level as her, they'd never have kept the job in the first place. But it was Dad's way of at least giving her an income to try and look after his grandkids and help her. Now, on no rational analysis could you say that the actual needs of each of those kids were remotely similar. The son needed a job. The oldest daughter really didn't need anything, but she did want to have a good family, and she was quite actively supporting her younger sister because she basically pitied her. because she didn't approve her ethics, her morals, her behaviours or anything else, but she was a sister and she was going to help her, no matter what. She recognised the brother needed the job, he'd worked hard, and she was willing to perhaps go on an advisory board in the business. She didn't want any ownership. The youngest daughter, unfortunately, only wanted to cash out anything that Dad was going to give her, she was going to spend. So what the family really needed was a guardianship arrangement for the youngest daughter, a mentoring and training and basically a building of an executive team around the son, and let the oldest daughter make her decision, but she was almost prepared to step out, so there was more to go to her two younger siblings because they had far more need of financial support. Dad could not do that. Ultimately, he came from traditional Eastern European background. He simply could not get his head across the idea of not sharing equally, although that conflicted with the idea of the son should be taking over the business. But the son really hadn't impressed him with performance. That was a problem. The end result was Dad, trying to do the right thing as he saw it, ended up doing the wrong thing. He lost respect of all three children. None of them were happy with the plans that he was making. His wife was getting an earful from everybody trying to change Dad's thinking, and Dad could not get over the idea that equal was not the same as equitable. That's a classic example of what goes wrong. Now, what are the strategies and solutions you can adopt to avoid that sort of thing happening, where out of fundamentally misguided good intentions, the family ends up with some serious conflict? I think the most important thing is you need to be having conversations early, particularly when you're going to be talking about succession in the business and estate planning for transferring assets from one generation to the next. You need to be having conversations with the family as early as possible, preferably set them up in something like a family council. Maybe only meets once a year if nobody else is really involved in the business. But it's a formal forum to talk about formal stuff. You can bring in external advisors, you can share it with a non-family member who can point out and perhaps comfort people to come to more appropriate decisions than their ethnic background, their cultural beliefs, their religious beliefs, or just their personal preferences would suggest. So that can help to keep the family out of trouble. It can help to make sure that when the family has been successful, its assets go in the right way, and it can avoid the business and issues around the business blowing the family to pieces. And that's about it, really. Just don't mix up the idea of I love my children equally, therefore I'm going to treat them all the same, because that is not the same as equity, which is being fair. If you found this useful, please give us a like, please share with other people who may find it useful, and come back next week for the next episode.